To this special webinar, this special conversation organized by the CAFU Policy Institute. The CAFU Policy Institute is a think tank at the Denise and Lenora Forotia Foundation that focuses on bringing out in-depth, insightful policy recommendations that can advance the Cameroonian economy and why not the Sub-Saharan African economy as well. We are pleased to have this important discussion today on Africa's road to recovery. And it's a pleasure to have a superwoman, an amazing woman join us in this conversation, Gwendoline Abunaw, and Dr. Denise Forotia, who is Executive Chairman of the CAFU Policy Institute and also co-chair of the Denise and Lenora Forotia Foundation, will be moderating this wonderful session. Please do use the Q&A box to send in your questions. Use the chat box to interact with panelists and attendees. Good morning, Dr. Forotia. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ansel. Very much appreciated. Thank you for your very kind words of vibrant introduction. I'm very excited to be hosting this conversation and to be hosting this conversation at a time when Africa has gone through a lot with regards to the pandemic, and we have been thinking about Africa's road to recovery with various African thought leaders. And this conversation is part of other conversations that many of you will be familiar with, where we bring thought leaders on Africa together to better understand a lot of the complexities around the response to the pandemic, but also, frankly, the opportunities that abound. And it is a great, great privilege and honor to be welcoming today and hosting one of the leading bankers in Africa, Ms. Gwendoline Abunaw. Gwendoline Abunaw is the managing director of Ecobank Cameroun, really the first female managing director in Cameroon, Ecobank being one of the top banks in Cameroon and also in Sub-Saharan Africa. Gwen is has more than 20 years of experience in the finance banking sector, occupied various C-suite positions since at least 2011, when she was head of corporate bank in Cameroon, including coverage of 6 Sub-Saharan African countries in the CEMAC region, and at the time, deputy managing director for Ecobank Cameroun. She's board member of at Ecobank Cameroun and Chad, as well as chairperson of boards, both the Pan-African Savings and Loans, which is a microfinance institution, as well as Ecobank Development Corporation. As I was remarking earlier, actually, Gwen had her bachelor's degree in science from University of Boya in banking and finance. And then at the Metropolitan University, Manchester Metropolitan University, where she obtained her MBA. And I was remarking now, Lenora happened to graduate from that university as well. So this is very close to our hearts. Gwen, it's really a great privilege and honor to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. It's a great pleasure for me to be part of this discussion. Thank you very much for the nice introduction and welcome.
Well, so Gwen, let's start. Now, we are more than a year into the pandemic. There were lockdowns. Things have opened up. There is vaccines, and Africa is getting its vaccines right now. Now, from a global view, what is your overall as to where we are currently in this pandemic in most Sub-Saharan African countries, Cameroon and most Sub-Saharan African countries?
Okay, I think the first thing I would say is that we survived. I think we all remember at the start of the pandemic, there was a fear that Africa was just going to disappear from the planet because of how we're going to manage the pandemic. I would give that up to maybe faith and the grace of God as well, because we don't yet have statistics as to, why or how we're able to manage and not be overwhelmed by everything as everybody was assuming. But I think it's also because of the quick reaction and the leadership in terms of closing our borders, but also because of our youth population with only 3% of people aged over 65. But we also have to say that maybe it's because of our immune systems that have resisted other life-threatening diseases, you know, from Ebola to malaria and the rest. But I think there's still a lot of work to do in terms of putting the pandemic or managing it in a place where we can say we are comfortable and we know the way forward. On the economic side as well, we are trying to find a balance as to how to move ahead, be it the private sector or the public sector. So I think we are in a stable, but still a wait and see position. And everybody, be it government or private sector, is trying to, you know, take the necessary baby steps towards recovery and living in our new normal.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, when you look at the economics of where we are and the economics of many sub-Saharan African countries, how they have attempted to, you know, to deal with this pandemic, where they are currently from that economic side. Can you go a little bit further as to the economic numbers that we see, how it is affecting various parts of the economy, and what some of the measures that you think have really been instrumental in having us stay afloat, as you said?
Okay. I think if you look at the banking sector in particular, you would see that a lot of the companies that we have in our books globally are still trying to find their feet. There was a slowdown in investment in capital expenditure because people didn't have visibility as to what the future was going to hold. So since 2020, we have seen slowdown in the use of facilities that companies normally have at their disposal for use. If you look at the government side, you equally see that the numbers in terms of the tax collection or the custom duty collections have greatly reduced because there's less investment, there are reduced performance of companies. Therefore, the percentage to also pay to the tax authorities is also reduced. If you look at the numbers in terms of foreign transfers, there's also a great reduction because you know that our countries are very dependent on imports. We import a lot of goods that we consume. So in terms of foreign currency transfers to pay for the importation of those goods, we have also seen great reduction in terms of volumes of transfers that are being done. In terms of investors coming in to the country to be able to do investments in various sectors like they used to do, we equally saw a reduction in inflows of cash towards investing in the country. The inflows we're seeing more were towards the support that was being given for the COVID-19 measures that the government was putting in place. So you would see that the numbers have greatly reduced. But when we talk about numbers also in the financial sector, people always get confused between liquidity in the sector and solvency. So at this time, one of the numbers that we are also looking at is the African countries that are also seeking support from the IMF that has given facilities to countries, particularly those in the CEMAC countries that I am more familiar with, in terms of support, because these countries are also highly dependent on oil as a commodity and oil for their livelihood. So the IMF funding has also come in to be able to support, and a lot of these countries in the CEMAC zone have adhered to the program that was put in place by IMF to support the various countries through this stage. So in terms of economics, That is what I can put on the table for now.
Well, I think that that is very, it's a sobering. At the same time, the responses that we have seen. Now, you mentioned the IMF and some of the work they've done to help stabilize some of these countries. Now, I know that there are, I don't know if this is already in practice yet, but there is the new special drawing rights so that the IMF managing director was open to extending for African countries. What can you tell us about that and the potential support to many of these African countries and what it means? Because obviously most of the time when Africans, when they think of the IMF, they only remember the bad, the structural adjustment coming in or so. So can you shed some light on that?
Okay, I think what is important is that I'll put it in very simple terms because for these discussions, we want, everybody to be able to understand simply what we're talking about. When you talk about the IMF programs, the IMF looks at governments and gives them support to say, how can you organize yourself? How can you organize your economies to function better? And they look at public spending. They look at the type of investments that are being done in the country. They look at the types of bilateral loans that governments are taking from the financial sector. They look at the type of borrowings or support that they are getting from foreign states. They look at the type of tax and fiscal measures that are in place in the countries. And when you have a situation where a country or the whole continent is going through a pandemic such as COVID, COVID is just coming to add to the other ills that the countries have been facing. If you take the case of Cameroon, we have been dealing with Boko Haram threats for quite some time. We have been dealing with the Anglophone crisis for quite some time. We have been dealing with the drop in oil prices for quite some time. So COVID is just coming to add to the existing problems and the existing solutions and recommendations that IMF has been discussing or working on with the governments in the CEMAC zone. So these measures help to sort of redress what is going wrong, to help the government switch to a better path to help the economies of the country. So sometimes, if you looked in the beginning, countries like Congo, Brazzaville were a bit hesitant to sign in the beginning. Others were quicker, like Cameroon or Chad, but now you have most of them sign up on the IMF program. This helps with one, making sure that internal debt is being paid, because when internal debt is paid, it means that the SME, small and medium-sized enterprise sector is able to also thrive. It helps the government to focus spending on key infrastructure areas that we need, be it roads, be it power supplies, be it telecoms. It helps to manage, the fiscal policies that the government is putting in place, because you want companies to be able to thrive and live, but as well as pay their dues that are owed to the government. So the IMF programs are very important for countries like ours because it sort of acts as a monitoring mechanism. It acts to put everybody in line, so to speak, and it helps us to make sure that our countries can develop in the right manner and the right speed that we expect. So I think we need more of that support. We are going to actually see more of that support as the countries recover or slowly come out of this COVID-19 pandemic.
I mean, I think I really appreciate that explanation because it really puts it in layman's terms, so to speak. And we have seen that most of the advanced economies were able to inject capital into their economy, inject to ensure that the citizens got lots of checks for them to be able to go day by day, month by month. Most countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, except for a few, were really unable to do that. And so from what you're saying, a lot of this stabilization from IMF goes to a lot of countries that do not have this fiscal space and liquidity, or to be able to undertake some of that. Now, you mentioned something that is very dear to our minds and in CAFU and the foundation, which is small and medium-sized enterprises. And how some of the financial or the fiscal policies in the country or so, and how IMF supports could also create space for SMEs to thrive. Now, you know the sector very well. More than 90% of Cameroon, of African businesses are small businesses or so, and have lots of issues. Now, what is your view, and how have you all in the banking and finance sector seen the SME sector during this period, and what are some of the measures that are being put in place for the SME sector?
I think, when we talk about COVID-19, we always see the bad side, the bad impact. But on the flip side, with all due respect to those of all of us actually who have lost loved ones during this period, I think the pandemic has given the SMEs, I will call it, a different angle on how to go further. What do I mean by this? There were some SMEs that were being stifled. They had reached like the peak period of what they could do, or the peak of their businesses. But because of this pandemic, they had new opportunities, new business opportunities to do more. The pandemic created a creative space for innovation to say, what else can we do as a small and medium-sized enterprise to grow? The other issue that we saw, or the other positive that we saw, was that the government also reached out a hand to SMEs to give tax reliefs to some of them, to say, if you're in this sector like tourism, or you were in the travel business, or you were in the transport sector, there were relief measures that were given. Another step was the regulator as well. The regulator of the financial institutions, came up with guidelines to say, if you have companies, particularly SMEs, that are in particular sectors, there's a certain treatment that you have to afford to them right now to enable them to cross over these difficulties. At the same time, us, particularly as Ecobank, what do we do for SMEs? We did several things to be able to support them through this period. One of the measures that we did was to launch a program called Elevate. Although Elevate was specific for women in small and medium-sized businesses or entrepreneurs, it was also to give them advisory service, give them special conditions to be able to start or grow their businesses during this period and going forward. The second thing we did was to provide digital software for small and medium-sized enterprises called OmniLight, to enable them better manage their businesses in a digital manner from this period, but also going onwards.
Yeah, so I think that's amazing, and some of the innovations like OmniLight that you're talking about, we know of that because we at least we have access to it on our side here. Now there is some of the issues that, if I were to just go on the female entrepreneur and the Elevate programs, how has from your standpoint, there is a lot of data out there from other countries regarding how women have been affected during the pandemic, and also women businesses and other sectors that they are part of. How do you see the policy of supporting women, especially women entrepreneurs, on a global scale? And have there been something specific outside of, let's say, what specific banks have done that have been able to give more opportunities or so for women to, as far as recovery efforts are concerned?
The business sector in Africa, when you look at it, is very informal. And most of the small businesses in Africa are run by women. If you look at the markets, if you look at the trading business, if you look at the small businesses on the streets, you have hairdressers, women selling mobile data and the rest. Women are at the center of our business, particularly in Africa. And during this period of COVID, if you take the case of our countries where there were curfews or there were lockdowns, you saw that the greatest impact was felt in these small businesses. The woman who is frying what we call locally puff-puff, the woman who is roasting fish on the street, the woman who sells in the market, the woman who sells in front of schools and businesses. They were the ones that were most impacted. If you look at the role that women play in their homes as a support system to give that foundation or that base for their families to thrive, you can only imagine the impact that this period would have had on women. We also saw that on the social side, there were increased cases of abuse. There were increased cases of young girls getting pregnant. And this all has an effect on our society. So it was good that for countries like us, luckily in Cameroon, we didn't get to the period of complete lockdown. And that is what enabled our countries to thrive. But for us also, there was a lot of education that had to be done to women to see how they could continue to do other informal businesses, but things that were more digital based. We also had to have discussions around financial inclusion, because it's at times like this that you saw the importance of financial inclusion. People being able to send money, to receive payments, to receive money became even more critical and more necessary during this period. So Elevate as a program came as an answer to, how do you support a woman, not only in giving them access to a bank account or giving them access to financing, but just the education of how do you take your business from informal to formal? How do you grow your business by being able to inject additional funds to take it from a small business to a medium-sized or a large business? And I think this conversation has to continue because one of the issues, if you look at AFTA, AFTA aims at trying to grow informal business and make Africa one big, strong market that can face their competitors on a global scale. And this would have women at the center of it because, as I said, women constitute a big chunk of the informal trade in Africa.
Yeah, so I think you could not have said it better than someone who understands it to their core. Now, you just mentioned after the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and that the launch of AFTA needed to be pushed back because of the pandemic. But thankfully, in January of this year, AFTA was formally launched, or it's in motion, and the secretariat opened in Accra, and we are on the move, to be able to integrate the continent commercially. So now, from your vantage point, especially looking at the financial, the transactions that are needed for inter-country, trade, you understanding very well how CEMAC works, and even the mobility that are there. Obviously, there are great opportunities. And where are some of the hurdles that you see regarding AFTA and us being able to eliminate some of those hurdles in order for us to enjoy the benefits or so that it could bring?
No, that is a fantastic question, and I think it's something that we need to all really look at. AFTA to me is really crucial for our economic growth, for job creation and making Africa a meaningful player in international trade. When you look at the hurdles, I think for me, the greatest hurdle will be to finalize and actually put the framework in place. So AfTA should become a reality. The next thing is that we have to be able to create the infrastructure for connectivity. When we talk about free movement of people, free movement of goods, we need infrastructure. And one of the impediments that we all have on our continent, or most countries on the continent have, is infrastructure. The other items that we have to look at is to actually put in place the protocol on free movement of persons and goods, because it is there on paper, I think, since 2018, but is it enforceable? I don't think so. As a traveler on the continent, there's always that struggle of visas and entry. Another thing is that leaders have to make it domestic policy. For it to work, we have to say, okay, this is the cost, this is how we are going to do it, and this is who needs to be on the table, you know, to make it happen. So that interrelation between public and private has to exist, you know. And then also we have to be open to industrialization. We have to be open to liberalization, because if you just take the case of COVID, most of the drugs and everything that we're expecting, you know, had to be imported. But you have other smaller countries that have production plants for drugs and goods of basic necessities in their countries. But a lot of us on the continent rely on imported goods. So I think these are the items that are going to impede AfTA being put in place, or the measures or the ideas that AfTA has to be put in place. And if the African countries that are involved can work together to put these items aside or agree on the best way to go forward, it would be beneficial to all of us on the continent.
Yeah, so and just to push a little bit on the AfTA angle. Now, do you see political will from across the continent, and from the economic, you know, from you all, the economic and major economic stakeholders, you know, in this? Is there a concerted effort from, you know, the economic operators to be able to push this and make sure that where folks are dragging their feet in some of the political commitments, you know, that were made, in the enforceability of that it actually takes hold?
Yes, you have just said the right word, political will. I think the implementation relies fully on political will, because if you look at the measures and the policies that are being listed out, it has to be driven by the government, unfortunately. But the good thing, or the positive thing, is, for me, when I look at the fact that it took 3 years to get everything kick-started, that is already a plus in our African standards, because we know that we have had other things like this in the past that 10, 20 years after, we couldn't get people to sign. So I look at that one aspect positively, and it gives me the sign that there is political will from the nations on the continent to do so. Now, the key problem will be implementation. Yes, COVID stopped us or slowed us down, but now that we are seeing that it is not going away, it's just taking a different shape and size or form, we have to go back on the table to say, okay, how do we start this thing? How do we put it in place? And that is where it has to be a national policy. There has to be a policy or a committee or an initiative to say, how do we implement these items in the country? And that would then have the government invite the private sector in to say, look, we need you guys to be in this discussion. We need you guys to be in this dance, because if you look at it, it's very beneficial to any economic player. If we are able to put in place the trade policy, you already have the financial institutions who have good products and services that are serving the country. But now imagine it being rolled across freely inside the African continent. We're already working on financial inclusion measures, which is very key to drive the trade goals that AfTA has, because you need to have everybody, be it in the towns or in the villages, connected to some kind of financial platform. There needs to be partnership between financial institutions, the telecoms companies, as well as the fintechs and the startups, because you have to integrate the systems. So I think that if the political will exists, there's a plan for implementation, there's a call for others in the private sector to come and join with the government to be able to roll out the agenda, it can only be positive things coming out of this initiative.
Yes, I do agree fully. It could only be positive. Most of the time when I'm asked, to explain some of the issues regarding AfTA, I always say, if you look at the US and Canada, Canada aligns itself fully with the US economy. Yes, they're a part of the UK, but they don't drive on the wrong side of the road. They drive on the right side of the road to align with the US economy. And the US economy is a juggernaut for sure. And I think about it, and I think of Cameroon, and I say, Cameroon needs to align with Nigeria. If you have African continental free trade, you stop dealing with 25 million people in Cameroon and deal with 200 million in Nigeria, and so it opens things up a lot more. Now let's I just want to have folks who are on the line. Thank you very much who are following us. Please, we need to get your questions. So use the chat function, the Q&A function to post your questions or so, and we'll take that. Now, Gwen, one of the issues that we tend to see usually happens, innovation, how did they say this? Necessity is
is a driver of innovation.
A driver of innovation, something like that, right? Yes, necessity is that. And we have seen, in the medical arena, a lot of, I was telling Lenora the other day that we need to figure out what are the COVID innovations, the COVID innovations from the economic angle. What are some of there's digital technologies, obviously, but what are some of the innovations that, the pandemic has brought onto the economy that maybe 10 years ago we are talking on Zoom now as one of those innovations, obviously.
Exactly.
But what are some of those innovations that may not be easily visible to us that the pandemic has brought out?
Okay. Before I jump onto what the innovation specifically that the financial sector and more pointedly Ecobank, let me at least include, because we're talking to a larger crowd. If you just look at, when I was talking about the SMEs and the window of opportunity that COVID brought, look at the number of people who have jobs, either from making masks or selling masks. Secondly, look at the local industries that started because of the production of gel. In the beginning, gel was very expensive. Everybody was going for the imported brands, but quickly we saw production units coming up to produce gel. If you look at the number of water points that we had along the roads in front of houses and what have you, this also opened up a different dimension and opportunity for people. If you look at the fintech areas where we had people coming up with all sorts of apps for deliveries, we had people coming up with drones for deliveries and pickups. We had so many ideas coming in just because there was a problem that was created. Now, if I come to the bank, in the bank, we have a culture in our countries of people wanting to physically come to the bank to just ask for their balance, to ask for a statement, to deposit money, to pay a bill. But because of the COVID pandemic and just the fear that they had of coming out, we had a lot more people requesting cards. We had a lot more people onboarding on our mobile app, the Ecobank mobile app, because with your app, you could check your balance, you could do transfers, you could connect to your mobile money account. You could pay your utilities just from your phone, sitting anywhere that you are. Ecobank during this period also launched the ATM that could collect cash, so you could do your cash deposits through the ATM. And you saw increased partnerships between financial institutions and telecoms companies, because I believe in that ecosystem, we realize that we have to be interconnected for us to be able to achieve the financial inclusion goals that we have as individual companies and the government has. There has to be that interrelation. You also saw the regulator and the central bank stepping in to work on policy and to approve policies to fast track or to facilitate digitalization. So I believe that, the COVID pandemic and the outcome of it, or the lessons learned, we are going to see more innovation. We're going to see more entrepreneurs coming up. We are going to see more startups. And I'm happy to know that companies like ours are already doing programs to support startups. And this should continue, because the future is Africa, as we all know. It's not just a statement, it's actually a reality. And I think COVID-19 has come to make that even more obvious.
Yes, I think I think that's really impressive. Some of the innovations that have been delivered because of this. Now, I would take some questions that I see coming through the chat. Let's see. I have Singapore. I'll take a few. That way we can lump them together.
Okay.
We have Singapore, Emmanuel Singapore. I appreciate your position on digital inclusion. What package and what adaptations did Ecobank make to include especially poor African and Cameroonian business women, popularly known as Bayam Selams? Given the current cost of running a current account with Ecobank, we can affirm typical Bayam Selam can access their service or afford the services. That's one. There's a lot of interest in SMEs here. There's anonymous attendee who says, managing director acknowledged many small and medium-sized businesses run by women are informal. What is the benefit of those businesses becoming formal in Cameroon? And there is one from Philippe Chekane. What has Ecobank to offer as innovative credit facilities to address the needs of SMEs for that contract? And lastly, within this area of SME, we have from Sustain Ahanda, could development banks as well as local currency could boost SMEs in this critical period? Not very clear what that is, but from just some of those, if you could lump in a response to, I know you've touched on some of these already. Yes, just do it globally.
Okay, no, thank you for the questions. I think they're very good questions, and they are very important, particularly in economies like ours. I like the question on Bayam Selam because when I launched the Elevate program earlier on this year, we actually invited the presidents of the various Bayam Selam associations in both Douala and in Yaoundé. And they were very happy to have been invited, because they noted that most of the time when these programs are being launched for women entrepreneurs, Bayam Selams are always left out of the invite. But the question you asked is so pertinent, because like I said in my earlier words, I said our economies, our business economies in Africa are largely run by women, and in the informal sectors, the people selling in the market, the women roasting fish and frying puff-puff on the streets, selling juice and yogurt, they are all women. So Ecobank, through the Elevate program, are catering to all levels of women, from Bayam Selams to call box, to hairdressers, to makeup artists. We are catering to every level of women who are doing business, or women who are doing business focused on activities for women. And what we are putting as a solution is to say, we don't want you to come and have a normal current account. because your business is specific. So we are giving special conditions on the current accounts that you have to open. The second point is that we know that you need financing, but your financing might not be at the scale that we usually give for a typical SME business. So we are offering financing solutions to meet the different layers of businesses that women are in. And this is not just something new. Actually, we always come up with a product to meet a particular target. We had opened a swag account that was tailored for university students because we know that they were not working but received money from their parents. So this was launched almost 2 or 3 years ago, and Elevate is just another innovation to address the need of women. So I hope that I've answered the question about the buy and sell. Now, informal sector, informal business sectors that are really lumped into the SME. What is the benefit of moving from informal to formal? This is a fantastic question, and I'm so happy that you asked. You know, when people do informal business or keep their businesses informal, it's because maybe they don't want to pay tax, you know, they don't want to pay rent, they don't want people to know how much they are making. And in a way, depending on what side you're sitting on, you might think this is a positive thing to do. But I'm going to go specifically to why it's important for you to have a formal bank account. First of all, when you have a bank account, the bank is able to assess the flows that you are earning from your business. And why is this important? It is important because if you come as maybe somebody who is selling what we call second-hand clothes, typically called okrika, you know, frippery, why should you, you know, have a formal account? If I don't know how much you're selling, and you come to me and you ask for 50 million to be able to buy your next consignment, you have no proof, no trace to show me that you'll be able to use 50 million and actually have a turn on your investment. Secondly, if you don't have a track record of what you're able to do, you cannot grow because everything that you'll be telling us or talking about will be verbal. There'll be no documentation anywhere of what you have done in the past. Thirdly, you will not be able to benefit from any tax relief. I just mentioned that during this period, be it the government or the banking sector, we're giving relief to certain companies based on their numbers, statistics that we had in our books. We were able to say, oh, if you're in the tourism sector, if you're in the transport sector, this is what you can benefit as a relief because of what is going on. If you're informal, we don't have this data. So it is very important for somebody who is forward thinking, who wants to grow the business, to have their informal business be converted to something formal. And the basic is to have an account. And now I can speak for Ecobank. We have packages for each type of business to be able to serve the customer and be able to fit the purpose for which you want to achieve. Now, you also mentioned, there was a third question about innovative credit facilities. You're at the right place, I would say, with Ecobank, because what we do is to try to cater or create products that match small businesses that are still growing. What do I mean by that? You know that small businesses, most of the time when they start, they don't really have financial statements. And normally when you go to a bank, the first thing they ask you is, where is your financial statement? Where is your business plan? You know, what is your cash flow projections? What is your source of guarantee? And obviously when people start having this question, they quietly carry their bags and say, oh, this is the wrong place for me. But what do we do at Ecobank? We have what we call product programs, because we know that a lot of the small businesses don't yet have all of these normal or traditional documents that they need for financing. So I'll give an example of a product program. You might be an entrepreneur who has just gotten your first contract to supply paper to a company like NAO, for example, or MTN. So with that document, with that contract, we are able to give you financing in advance with some internal checkings that we do with the company that has given you the contract to make sure that it is actually authentic and valid. So we are able to give you an advance for you to be able to, get the goods that you need to be able to supply the company. And when you receive payment, you'll be able to reimburse the bank. And this, I will end here, is another reason why you have to formalize your business, because if you don't formalize your business and you don't have a bank account, you cannot benefit from such innovative credit facilities. So I will stop here for now and maybe take the next set of questions and, if possible, elaborate wherever it's needed.
Yes, no, thank you very much for that. And I think for us at the foundation and the CAFU Institute, helping informal businesses convert to formal business is part of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Program. It is so central. There is just no way you can really grow without being in the formal sector.
Exactly.
And that is a foundational issue regarding business growth. Now, Gwen, let me take one question from Puran Pandey, who says, how is the financial health of the banks and the NPA as banks globally, and its NPA? I don't know what NPA stands for, and its NPA as banks globally are battling large-scale defaults. And same is likely to be accelerating during the pandemic. So it pretty much talking about the health of banks, across Sub-Saharan Africa. So can you talk on that?
Yes, that's a very good question. But I would first, focus on Cameroon, because it's important for you to understand the banking sector in Cameroon, because a lot of this information, what is being cited here, is when you're talking about the global economy. They're talking about the global economy is going through a recession and the rest, so you have to put it in context. In Cameroon, we have 15 banks, and we have 5 banks that actually make up 78% of the banking sector in terms of deposits and in terms of loans. And those 5 banks, you have Société Générale, Afriland, BSEC, you have Ecobank, and you have Attijari Wafa. And those 5 banks, have the bulk of the deposits and the credits in the market. So when you look at the global health of financial institutions in Cameroon, I think it is stable in spite of the COVID pandemic. I think maybe what the participant was referring to is something I mentioned in the beginning. During the pandemic, people start mixing up liquidity with solvency. Liquidity is the cash that banks have in the market. In the CEMAC zone, we are known to be very liquid in terms of the financial sector. Solvency is something different. It's the ability to be able to repay facilities that you may have. And we don't have that problem in the financial sector in Cameroon. It's liquid, and in this pandemic, the central bank took measures to make sure that banks continued being very liquid by offering also facilities to banks that may have had a liquidity situation. But what we noticed from the statistics is that the bulk of the liquidity that was made available to banks by the central bank was not utilized, which is a very positive sign, showing that banks in the CEMAC zone have sufficient liquidity. Another measure that you will see is that there were a lot of government securities being traded in this zone and also being sold in the secondary market. So there were primary market that was very active with the banks itself, but also on the secondary market space where banks were selling to individuals and companies, insurance companies, and the rest, which shows very positive sign of the financial health of the financial institutions. And another reason why there was so much liquidity was what I said in the beginning, the fact that a lot of multinationals and other medium-sized companies were not taking or using facilities like they used to do because they were waiting to see the outlook of what was going to happen in the economy based on the pandemic that came to add to the already existing ills that we had, like the Boko Haram, the Anglophone crisis, political instability in some of the countries, and what have you. So the listener should go away knowing that as far as the financial sector in Cameroon, and I would dare to say in the CEMAC zone, it is stable. And if you want to be sure about that, you should always use the Standard & Poor's rating agency and the Moody's agencies, who I believe during this period have not downgraded the rating of the countries in this zone.
Thank you very much. Let me take two more questions. Unfortunately, the hour is going by very fast without notice. But two more questions. One from Ijeoma Vanessa, which says Ecobank is one of those companies stood by governments in Cameroon through CSR activities. So as a result, I would like to know if the government is thinking of putting in place a sort of public insurance scheme, just that the population is taken care of. I think this is maybe in light of other countries where they have national insurance schemes. So if there's any idea about that, that's one. The second question that I'll take from Dr. William Array, which says, I want to appreciate the fact that mentioned COVID-19 has simply added another layer to the challenges faced by many African governments, such as peace and security, as you just mentioned. I'm interested in knowing, from your view, the prospects of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement in improving peace and security on the continent. So just two of that, and unfortunately we'll be wrapping up.
Okay. Thanks to Ijeoma for commending us on our corporate social responsibility. Yes, in fact, we did donate equipment and other items that could help in the fight against COVID to hospitals in Cameroon. As far as that is concerned, for us, it is actually part of our mission and vision. We actually believe that if we are going to participate in the economic development of Africa, we have to make sure that the citizens are healthy. Because if you have people who are not healthy, you cannot really be running any institution because you have no people to come and actually utilize the facilities. So for us, it goes hand in hand. Now, in terms of what the government is doing, unfortunately, I don't have that type of information because I don't work in the government. But what does exist is the Social Security company, CMPS, as most people know, that I believe would also be adjusting itself like most African countries are doing to make sure that in the future, the right to the basic layer, right to the last layer of their populations are covered by some scheme, because COVID came to expose us in that sense to show that not everybody had access to proper social security schemes that are needed in countries such as ours. So I will, after this session, make sure that I get my teams to check what we have from the government to be able to put it in the live chat so that you have the information. The next question was on peace and security measures. I think that if you look at the whole structure of AFTA, it's apart from trade, peace and security, for me, is a must for anything to function. Because imagine trying to put in place these trade goals and all of these initiatives in countries that are in war, in countries that have security issues. How will investors come? Investors will not come to countries where there's instability. Nobody wants to put their money where they're not sure how it's going to work. So for me, peace and security, as I've seen in the documentation from AFTA, is one of the key items on the agenda. they are calling on each of the member states to make sure that they take the necessary measures to ensure there's peace, diplomacy, democracy continues to function smoothly, and security. That's why I think in our case, there's a lot of talk about dialogue and trying to resolve the Anglophone crisis, because it is a major impediment for the growth and development of our economy. I will go further, and I would encourage you to read on it. There's a lot of data on this out there. The fact that we are going to see post-COVID, a lot of the foreign countries, be it European countries, be it the Americas, be it China, who are all going to change their geopolitical strategy towards support for Africa. And that support is going to come from trying to give debt forgiveness solutions to many African countries. Is going to come, as we are seeing, from the vaccines. If you look at the COVAX agreement, which is to make sure that everybody has access to vaccines, that is going to be a tool that a lot of the foreign countries are going to use to reach out a hand to Africa, because like I said, Africa is the future. You're going to see the Americas, you know, the Biden-Harris government have a very clear and focused strategy on Africa, because they want to try to gain steps ahead and push China a bit backwards, because China has sort of put itself very forward in terms of support to Africa. So peace and security is going to be a major player, major players or major elements in AFTA's strategy, because if we don't have peace and security on the African continent, it's going to inhibit investors, and it's also going to inhibit us being able to throw out our trade or be at par with global economies in terms of trade development.
Yeah, so appreciate that. Now, unfortunately, we are running out of time, but let me take one question and I'll add mine. A question from Professor Tangwa, Godfrey Tangwa, who says, currently in Cameroon, there is an unfolding scandal related to IMF loans to fight COVID, what is referred to as COVID-gate. What is the effect in your view? What effect in your view has this had on the overall economic situation of the country? You know, that's what Professor Tangwa wants to know. But let me ask Gwen one thing that I want to get your thoughts on regarding the future of work. You know, the future of work and how the post-COVID, you know, the post-COVID economy would look like, or is shaping out to be. What is your view on what, you know, or how work looks like in the future? Is it still brick and mortar, and how is this transformation from your standpoint playing out?
Okay, thank you. I think I would leave the question on IMF and the government's ongoing search about what is happening, because I don't have the details. You know, the COVID-19 funds that were being received, I think they were managed by the government. So I wouldn't know exactly how it was used, what it was channeled for, and the rest. So I will leave that, and maybe all of us will just watch from where we are to see how that is unfolding nicely. It's not going to be the same. We have been able to work successfully by doing both remote working and in-person working. We have been able to function without travel. I used to travel twice each month for as long as I could remember for different work engagements, but I haven't traveled since February of last year. And I've been able to still participate in webinars. I've been able to do trainings. I've been able to be guest speakers. I've been able to get my board meetings done. We have been able to hold a general assembly, and the list goes on. A lot of institutions have developed their platforms. Most people are on Teams, you have Zoom, you have so many platforms to be able to communicate with your colleagues all over the world. We've been able to educate our staff on work-life balance. I think a lot of us, myself included, I'll raise my hand because I'm a mom and I'm a wife, but I've been able to manage my kids, my grown kids in the US and the little one I have at home, and do it even in a better way than I used to do, because I've had time to really balance myself out. And I believe that even people's mental health has improved because it's been stressful, but it's been a different kind of stress. I think all of us have reassessed our priorities because of that almost palpable nearness of I could die, any second because of COVID. And that is how work should be. I believe that we should look more at how efficient we can be, not where we are sitting. How efficient can the people that work for you be no matter where they're sitting? And what tools can you give them to be able to do their jobs efficiently and comfortably, no matter where they're sitting? And that is where the digital technologies come in. We all have to invest in digital technologies. We have to invest to be able to serve our clients. We have to invest to be able to give our staff the ability to do their work. And we have to transform even the way we work. Must we all work full time? Can we not do part time? Can we not do digital sales agents more? Should we not have call centers that are located, in remote areas? We all have to rethink, the future of work. And I think what we have seen this last year is only the beginning. We are going to have more innovations and more inventive ways of doing work. And I, in particular, am actually quite excited because I think that we can be more efficient in how we work and more productive if we just have an open mind.
Well, Gwen, I think this has been extremely riveting conversation. An hour has gone by too quickly, and I would have really loved to continue, but unfortunately, the hour is now upon us. Let me give you an opportunity to just have some concluding remarks regarding how you see where you sit and how you see things going forward in a couple of minutes.
Thank you very much. I've had a very, good time talking to you. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I love the questions that we got from the participants. I think, and I always keep repeating it, Africa is the future. But it needs all of us, particularly those of us who are on the continent and those of us who are Africans, to be part of the conversation. We need to take up, whatever angle or whatever part of the stick that we think we can positively contribute to and come and join the conversation. I'm happy to work for an institution like Ecobank because their mission is Africa. They say Africa is our objective. How can we impact the people in the communities in which we operate? And how can we actually groom Africans to know that they can achieve whatever it is that they set themselves up for? And we continue to innovate and develop products and services that fit the purpose of those who live in these communities. What we need here is different from what somebody might need in New York. So it's important to do products that fit the needs of the communities in which we operate. And I think that after, it's really something that if it can be put in place, it would transform Africa. But like I said, we need political will, and we need also the private sector to join that conversation so we move from talk to concrete actions. So please, Dennis, continue having such conversations, continue coming up with topics like this, giving us these platforms to be able to share views, particularly in very simple terms, so that everybody can understand, because sometimes people don't have an opinion because the conversation is way above their head. But if we can have simple conversations like this to talk about current subjects, and how it affects the population, I think it makes a huge difference. So I wish you all the best at Cafu Policy Institute, and I look forward to having such conversations with you again in the future. Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you, Gwen. The honor, the pleasure is ours. We are very delighted to have you. I want to thank your team who worked tirelessly to get this done. I want to thank our team, Santa, Ansel, Tala, Ipo, all the everyone who has been working very hard to make this happen. Now we have these conversations every 2 weeks or so regarding some of the current issues out there. So really appreciate that. And for everyone who is participating and joining us, thank you very much. And Gwen, thank you, thank you, thank you. And please stay safe and continue to be the light for a lot of us as to how to transform the continent.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So please have a good afternoon and good morning wherever you are.